Nerd alert! Learning is important, right?
Yes, exactly. What a bunch of nerds.
Nerd alert!
Right.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper, I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hello!
We're back with your weekly Nerd Alert. Every week, I'll take a deep dive into academic marketing research and translate its complex ideas into simple, understandable language for Rob. And of course, for all of you, are you ready to nerd out, Rob?
I entered the cheat code Maximum Nerd.
All right, let's get into it. As always, we'll link the research we cover in the episode notes. This week, I read a study titled The Underdog Effect, the Marketing of Disadvantage and Determination Through Brand Biography. This is by Neeru Piharia, Anat Kinan, Jill Avery, and Juliet Shore, published in the Journal of Consumer Research in 2011. But before we get into things, Rob, quick question for you. What brand do you think has the best underdog story?
Oh, for sure Netflix. I mean, what a great story. Started out as DVD by mail. Blockbuster basically laughed Reed Hastings out of the boardroom when Reed Hastings offered to sell Netflix to Blockbuster. What a big mistake. For 50 million bucks too. It's crazy. That's like the cost of one episode of one of their streaming shows now.
Right. Is there a movie on Netflix versus Blockbuster? There probably will be one day.
There should be. If you haven't listened to it, another podcast out there, Business Wars, does a fantastic series on Blockbuster versus Netflix.
I love that podcast. That's a good one to listen to. All right. Well, great example. This research digs into underdog brands and why they are successful. So across cultures, we are drawn to underdog stories. Think about David versus Goliath, Rocky Balboa, Harry Potter, which I thought was a fun. I'm like, oh, I guess Harry Potter was an underdog. Think of that as an underdog story, but sure. Brands are picking up on that too. Think of Apple's famous Garage origin story and the number of brands, even like Rob mentioned. The researchers call this an underdog brand biography. This is a story that brands tell that combines two different factors. The first is an external disadvantage. So maybe the brand lacked money, connections, resources. And the second is passion and determination. The founders pushed ahead anyway, fueled by grit and big dreams. Together, those elements form what the researchers call the underdog effect. Rob, do you think being perceived as an underdog helps a brand perform better?
Yeah, I think the key word there is underdog. I don't think people are rooting for the brand that sucks, but they're definitely going, okay, hey, if you're the David and the big guy's Goliath, everyone wants David to win. And of course, so yeah, for sure. Like in Avis, we try harder. You kind of root for that versus the big yellow hurt. So yeah, I do think as long as you're providing an underdog value, then people are going to root for an underdog brand.
Right, that Avis ad is a great example. And sometimes brands really lean into that. And yeah, I'd say sometimes I feel that way. Like you see an upstart, they're kind of challenging like a big category leader and you kind of want to buy from them. So this study looked at this and they actually ran 4 different studies to test when and why underdog brand stories resonate. So study 1, it was a national online survey with 181 participants. They were introduced to a fictional company A that was described as either an underdog, say they start in a garage, few resources, determined to overcome, or a top dog, industry insiders, well-funded and expected to succeed. Both were small companies in their market to keep the size constant. So the top dog wasn't necessarily bigger. After reading the stories, participants rated their purchase intentions across 6 categories. And the results showed that people identified more strongly with the underdog company, and even purchase intentions rose. The effect was especially strong among participants who already considered themselves underdogs in life. And then study 2 asked a new question. Is it enough to just have disadvantages or just have determination? And so they built this 2x2 test. So they had a victim who was disadvantaged but not determined, a privileged achiever, advantaged but determined, a top dog, advantaged and unmotivated, and an underdog, disadvantaged but determined. With 222 participants, they found the underdog narrative outperformed all others. Disadvantage alone wasn't inspiring, and determination alone wasn't special. But when combined, the effect was powerful. Participants showed higher self-brand connection and higher purchase intentions. Study 3, they compared American and Singaporean students. Why'd they do this? Well, US culture tends to celebrate this American dream, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But Singapore, on the other hand, emphasizes social order and hierarchy more than the United States. So they had 90 Americans and 92 Singaporeans read either an Underdog or a Top Dog brand biography. And both groups preferred underdogs, but the effect was much stronger in the US. Americans rated their brand connection 4.05 out of 7, compared to just 3.36 in Singapore. And Americans also showed a higher purchase intent. And then they had study 4, the last one. They had over 200 students, and they had to choose between 2 actual chocolate brands, Scharfenberger and Dagoba, which I had not heard of. Depending on one condition, one brand was framed with an underdog biography, the other with a top dog one. About 71% of participants chose the underdog brand. But here's the kicker. When people were buying for themselves, the underdog effect spiked to 89% if they had just been primed with underdog-themed movie clips, like Rocky or Rudy.
Really? Adrian!
When buying for a friend, the effect dropped off. So, in other words, underdog stories are most persuasive when the purchase is tied to your own identity. Put simply, underdog stories matter most when identity is at stake or when this purchase kind of feels personal. Time for a Row GPT. Underdog branding is like rooting for the small food truck at a country fair. It doesn't have the slick signage or the corporate budget of the big vendors, but you see the owners hustling and pouring their heart into every dish. People connect with that story. It feels real. It could feel like part of their own struggle. And when you bite it and it's good, you're hooked for life. All right, Rob, what'd you think?
Wow. So good. It's actually deeply personal to me right now because, as you know, I've always loved Apple. And Apple was known as they would fly a flag over Cupertino because Steve Jobs would say, I'd rather be a pirate than in the Navy. And I feel like that is changing, that they are becoming the Navy, or they are the Navy. And all these other people are doing more interesting things than they are. I was just telling someone else the other day, like if there was one brand when I was back in the 90s, I would have gotten an Apple tattoo. If there was one brand I would get a tattoo, I would have. I mean, just so passionate. And I've been so passionate with them for so long, but they are just losing their underdog story. And they're just becoming what Microsoft was. And Microsoft is actually becoming more interesting with their investments in AI. And that really resonates to me, that you want that challenger who's coming into the marketplace and shaking things up. I feel like ChatGPT, OpenAI, has really started to play that role against players like Google and Gemini. Like they're coming in and making everyone else raise their game. And that's when consumers win. So I love that they were also queuing people up with narratives from movies. You can just see how, us, especially us Americans, we love that. We love that underdog story. Yeah.
Yeah, I could almost see this working for any brand because they had that one study where the companies were the same size. So it's not like the underdog was significantly smaller.
Yeah.
And I wonder if any marketer could look at their brand. You must be an underdog in some way. And could you tap into that through a story, since people
definitely
they love to root for one? Another thing I was thinking is it's interesting that it works a lot better when it's a purchase for yourself. So maybe when you're in a big gifting season, this type of message might not perform as well. If people are buying for others, they tend to not, right? They don't resonate as much with an underdog story. So just interesting to think, if you're the type of brand who has something that's usually bought personally versus gifted to someone else, this story might not work as well.
Did I miss it? Did they say why that when you buy for someone else that the underdog story doesn't work? I don't doubt it. I'm just curious what the rationale would be.
Yeah, it just says that was that study where it was the last study 4. Yeah, I'd have to look into it more. So when they were buying for their friend, the effect dropped off a bit. So they connect it to like underdog stories are most persuasive when it's tied to your own identity. So it feels personal. But yeah, I'd have to look into that more.
Maybe people perceive when they're giving a gift that you're just going to buy the premium big dog in the category so that the person receiving it thinks it's a good thing versus, oh, you bought me the underdog brand. Like maybe that's not as maybe perceived as good. I don't know.
Yeah. Or you don't consider it as like personal of a purchase because it's not for you. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.